Good morning. Continuing on with the readings, and this week I'd like to share some teachings from two different books. The first is this really wonderful book by Bhante Piyananda, who's a very senior Sri Lankan monk who has a monastery in LA. And this book is called Away from LA, and it's a collection of stories, times that he's traveled to different countries around the world and has given different teachings in different situations. And I felt like it was a really wonderful example of presenting the basics of the Buddha's teachings in real life situations, and really a lot of really wonderful stories in here. And then I'd also like to just do a little bit of reading from Stillness Flowing as well, which is the biography of Luang Por Chah, written by Ajahn Jayasaro. And each day I'll just kind of explore a particular theme and just do some readings from both books that touch on that theme. So for today, the theme that I'd like to explore a little bit is social harmony and non-harming. And so I wanted to begin with this story from Bhante Piyananda's book about a time when he traveled to the country of Israel to give teachings there. A close friend of mine, Mr. Tissa Wijaratane, was the Sri Lankan ambassador to Israel in 2007. He invited me to spend 10 days in that country to conduct retreats and give lectures. He and I had previously discussed the value of Buddhism for bringing peace to the world, and he thought it would be good if I went to Israel, troubled then as it is now, to speak on this subject. I readily accepted his invitation. I had been intrigued by Israel ever since I read a quote from Simon Peres, who at 90 was president until 2014. In a 1993 interview with the New York Times, he said, "You know, in recent years I became a Buddhist. What I mean is that I understand that the river is never the same at any moment. It changes with the water flow all the time. The banks may remain the same, but not the water." Soon after my arrival, Tissa arranged for me to meet Dalia Rabin, the daughter of the former Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin. While he was Prime Minister, he had signed a peace agreement with the head of the Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat. As a result, Prime Minister Rabin was later assassinated by an Israeli who didn't want peace with the Arabs. Miss Dalia Rabin, an attorney, followed in her father's footsteps. She has written a book on peace and has worked tirelessly in her country to promote peace between the PLO and the Israelis. A wonderful woman, I thoroughly enjoyed our 3-hour conversation. Dalia said, "Reverend, my father tried to make peace, but it was difficult because of the lack of trust, fear, and of course the intervention of arms traders who profit from war. He spent his life trying to clear the path toward peace for the benefit for all." Dalia, the Buddha said that not seeing things clearly as they really are will result in reactions based on fear, partiality or bias, anger or hatred, and ignorance. These are the major obstacles to achieving peace, and are the same obstacles that your father sought to overcome during his career as a peacemaker. We have faced those same obstacles in Sri Lanka during our long war with the LTTE, the terrorists who wanted to carve out a piece of our country for their own. Innocent people were being killed on a daily basis, and the only people who were profiting were the arms dealers. These 4 modes of reacting cloud the issues, preventing the parties from having a clear view of the actual situation. It keeps the blood flowing. And 2 years after this meeting, the Sri Lankan armed forces ended the war with the terrorists, and peace still holds. I believe the Buddha said that all troubles start with the arising of the concept of me, I, and mine. It seems that these 4 reactions you just spoke of are all based on these very concepts. You are correct, Reverend. In each and every conflict, there is always my view, I am angry, I fear such, and only my perspective is true. We identify ourselves with these 4 modes of reacting, and we begin to believe that they are actually who we are. But those are delusions. Because of these false identifications, wars continue to rage, and there are never any winners. This reminds me of the fable of the donkey and his shadow. I said, "Do you know this one?" "No, Reverend, please tell me," replied Dahlia. Long ago, a traveler hired a donkey to take him on a journey. The traveler sat on the donkey's back, and the owner led it with a bridle. It was a very hot day, and when the sun was at its peak, the traveler became weary and overheated. The traveler asked the owner to stop. He got off the donkey and sought shelter from the sun in the donkey's shadow. The owner of the donkey also tried to get in the shade too, but there was only room for one person. They started quarreling about who had the right to sit in the shade. The traveler said, "I rented this donkey for my journey, so I am entitled to sit in its shadow." The owner of the donkey said, "I rented you the donkey, but not his shadow. Therefore, I am entitled to sit in its shade." The argument escalated, and the two men started hitting each other. While they were exchanging blows, the donkey ran off, leaving them without shelter from the scorching sun. Dahlia laughed at the story. This often happens and can result in war. The two sides fight, and whatever it is they are fighting over is lost to both, along with the loss of many human lives. During my trip, Tissa arranged for me to speak before several Israeli Buddhist organizations. I also conducted a one-day retreat at the Bhavana House, a regional center for the World Federation of Buddhists. It was attended by approximately 75 highly intelligent people who were serious about practicing meditation and learning the Buddha's teachings. I gave a talk on the Noble Eightfold Path and the differences between samatha and vipassana meditation. It was followed by a lengthy and very lively question and answer session. The first question was raised by a man in his mid-30s. He asked, "How does the Buddha regard war?" To begin to answer that important question, I will give you a quote from the Dhammapada. "Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. It is appeased by non-hatred. This is an eternal law." The Buddha implies in this statement that this is a truth that is applicable at all times, in all places, even to the ends of the universe. War never has been, nor will it ever be, the answer to differences of opinion, perspective, and conflict. The very next verse states, "Those who don't know this will perish in their quarrels. Those who realize it will have their quarrels calmed." There are never winners when it comes to warfare. I could see heads nodding in the audience. I was sure that their very life in Israel had taught them the truth of this eternal law. Another verse from the Dhammapada clearly explains the Buddha's views on conflict. "Victory begets enmity. The vanquished dwell in pain. Happily the peaceful live, discarding both victory and defeat." An incident from the Buddha's life clearly illustrates his views on war. The Rohini River was situated on the border of Sakya, the Buddha's home country, and neighboring Kolya. It flowed down from the Himalayas and provided both kingdoms with water for irrigation. There was a small reservoir where water was stored during the rainy season for use during the growing season. All agricultural lands in both countries depended on this water. A drought occurred that threatened the crops in the entire area. The farmers were concerned that there wouldn't be enough water in the reservoir for everyone. The Kolyan farmers were determined to have all of the water for their fields, and the Sakyan farmers decided the same. Verbal exchanges escalated to blows, and both countries readied their armies for battle on the opposite banks of the Rohini River. The morning both armies were preparing to go to war, the Buddha was residing at Jetavana Monastery in Savatthi. With his paranormal vision, he perceived what was about to happen, and that without his intervention, a great amount of blood would be shed that day. He instantly transported himself to a spot upriver from where the two armies were unsheathing their swords. The sunlight gleamed on the bare blades that would soon be bathed in blood. The Buddha serenely walked down the bank of the river toward the soldiers. The Sakyan generals were the first to recognize him and declared that it would not be proper to kill in his presence. They immediately dismounted from their horses and put away their weapons. The Kolyan soldiers did the same thing. The Buddha waded into the river and, standing midstream, said, "Why have you come to this place?" General Mahanama answered, "We have come to wage war on this sandy plain." Then the Buddha asked, "Royal Highnesses, what is the cause of your strife?" The two opposing generals answered simultaneously, "The water of this Rohini river is the cause of it." "What is more valuable, the water in this river or the earth?" questioned the Buddha. "Compared to the water in this river, the earth is much more valuable," answered Mahanama. "What is more valuable, the earth or human life?" asked the Buddha. "Of course, human life is more valuable," answered the Kolian general, Vishnamita. "Just for the sake of some water from the Rohini river that you yourselves agree is of small value compared to human life, would you wish to destroy human lives by fighting one another? Not the slightest amount of pleasure could be found in worthless conflicts and wasteful strife," said the Buddha. The Buddha began to preach a parable to them about conflict and how no good can ever come of it. As they listened intently, the generals and their two armies began to soften their stance toward one another. The tale was the well-known one about the quail sage and the hunter. I will tell you the story now. Long ago there lived a very wise quail. He taught many important practical lessons to his great flock, and as a result of his wisdom they called him the sage. The flock lived together in a beautiful forest. They had everything they needed, and they lived happy, contented lives. One day a hunter came into the forest and tricked the quail with his clever bird calls. Thinking he was one of them, they approached him. In the blink of an eye, he tossed his net and captured them. Scooping them up, he put them in his basket and took them to sell at the market. The hunter captured several quail every day. Becoming very fearful, the quail decided to take the matter to the sage and ask him what to do. The quail sage thought about it, then said, "As soon as the net is thrown over you, stick your necks through the openings, flap your wings, and fly up into the sky. Working together, you'll have the strength to do this. Then land in the nearest bramble bush, letting the net become tangled on it. You can then scurry out from under it to safety." The next day the hunter came to the forest, used his bird calls, and trapped several quail under his net. Much to his surprise, the birds poked their heads through the openings in the net and flew away. He watched with great frustration as they escaped from his reach. He followed the birds, hoping to recapture them. All he found was his empty net tangled and torn on a bramble bush. For many days he kept trying to catch the quail, but working together as a unit, they thwarted his efforts. The hunter's wife became angry and insulted him, saying he was useless and couldn't provide for his family. He answered with confidence, "Don't worry, dear. One day soon, those birds will stop working with one another, and they'll be back in my basket again." The hunter was right. Before long, two quail began to quarrel. A silly incident caused it, but neither one was willing to make peace. They continued bickering, allowing the petty disagreement to escalate by trading hurtful insults. Soon other quail became involved, taking sides. The sage overheard the birds arguing. He knew that they were in grave danger because they were no longer willing to cooperate. He spoke to the whole flock, saying, "Those of you who want to live in peace and cooperate, follow me. Those who don't, you're on your own, but beware." The next day the hunter came upon the group of quail that had been bickering. He threw his net over the birds, and two of them immediately started arguing. One said, "You never do your share of the work." The other one shot back, "I do more than you." While they were busy arguing, the hunter quickly bundled them up and stuffed them into his wicker basket. He smiled to himself, knowing that his wife would be pleased. After telling the generals this story, the Buddha said, "Even in ancient times, the ones who survived were the ones who learned to work together to settle arguments peacefully. Those that didn't perished." The impact of the Buddha's story began to placate the generals' minds. The Buddha, seeing that some anger still remained, preached the more serious Atadanda Sutta to them. I will recite it for you now. Fear results from resorting to violence. Just look at how people quarrel and fight. Seeing people struggling like fish writhing in shallow water with enmity against one another, I became afraid. At one time I had wanted to find some place where I could take shelter, but I never saw any such place. There is nothing in this world that is solid at base, and not a part of it that is changeless. I had seen them all trapped in mutual conflict, and that is why I had felt so repelled. When a human does not identify with mind and matter at all, when one does not grieve for what does not exist, then one cannot sustain any loss in this world. When one does not think, this is mine, or that belongs to them, then, having no egoism, one cannot grieve with the thought of, I do not have. If you ask me to describe a human who is unshakable, I say that where there is no harshness, where there is no greed, no trace of desire, and when a human is the same in all circumstances, then you have what I would call the praiseworthy condition of a human unshakable. A human of discernment without a flutter of desire does not accumulate. So everywhere one sees peace and happiness. The wise human is not rated with the distinguished, the lowest, nor with ordinary people. Calm and unselfish, one is free from possessiveness, one holds on to nothing and rejects nothing. The two armies dispersed and went back to their separate kingdoms. The Buddha had prevented bloodshed and returned to his monastery. A young woman stood up and asked, did the Buddha have any advice for preventing war? Yes, in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha spoke of the kingdom of the Vajjayans, a very well-run country that lived in peace with its neighbors. He said that there were 7 practices that they observed which contributed to their well-being. Number 1, gather together for frequent discussion to keep the lines of communication open. Number 2, meet in harmony and unity, depart in harmony and unity, and work together in harmony and unity. Number 3, respect and follow all laws, or if a law is found to be incorrect, work to change it in a lawful manner. Number 4, respect and listen to worthy leaders, both religious and secular. Number 5, refrain from committing or advocating violent crimes, rape, destroying others' property, or killing. Number 6, respect, protect, and maintain the temples and shrines. Number 7, preserve personal mindfulness so that in the future the good among the people will come to them and the good already gathered feel at ease with them. Just read the quote of the Buddha that he ends with. Self-conquest is far better than the conquest of others. Not even a god, an angel, Mara or Brahma can turn into defeat the victory of such a person who is self-subdued and ever restrained in conduct. Okay, so now I'll just share a few readings from Stillness Flowing on the same theme of social harmony and non-harming. So I just wanted to begin with a short teaching from Lumpur Cha on non-harming and the first precept. Lumpur reminded people of the importance of the first precept. There's a quote, "If everyone kept this precept, the country would not be in such turmoil, the world would not be in so much a mess. The Buddha forbade the taking of life right from ants and insects upwards, because if you're capable of killing ants and insects, you're capable of killing rats and birds, ducks and chickens, cattle and buffaloes, horses and elephants. If you can kill horses and elephants, you have it within you to kill a human being. And in the end, you're capable of killing an arahant. There's that kind of progression. So the Buddha forbade killing altogether. You shouldn't kill anything, not even an ant or an insect. In the end, wise people look for a way out of the world to make as little bad karma as possible until they can stop making it altogether." Paul Nudang was one who yielded to Lumpur's logic and gave up the taking of life. There's a quote, "He taught us lay people to refrain from taking life, to make our living in an honest way. But most lay people would get stuck on this precept, including me. Because we lived in the countryside, we all thought, if we don't take life, what are we going to eat? In my mind, I wanted to argue the point. If all we took to offer to the monks every day to eat with their rice was chili sauce, wouldn't all the monks leave the monastery? But Lumpur had the wisdom to be able to lead us out of our delusion. He gave the example of civil servants and the Chinese merchants. He said, they don't do any rice farming, so how is it that they eat rice every day? What about the utensils you use, the pots and plates and so on? Do you know how to make those things yourselves? Can you make a spittoon? If you can't, then how is it that you possess those things? How did you get them? You have to find a way out with wisdom. If you don't take life, you have to use your intelligence to find another method. It's not always necessary to kill in order to eat meat. Wise people must find a skillful means of avoiding the creation of bad karma. You must refrain from unwholesome actions of body, speech, and mind, because it will have unfortunate consequences. I considered what he said and agreed with all of his reasoning. And I'll just share a few short teachings from Luang Por Chah on communal harmony and the process of admonishment, kind of dealing with conflicts in the community. On one occasion, he began, as was his custom, by emphasizing the importance of living together in harmony, of how important it was that the foreign monks related to each other according to the conventions laid down in the Vinaya. He instructed them that, as a group of samanas, they should put behind them all consciousness of different skin color, language, and culture, and look on each other with kindness and respect as companions in the holy life. They should train themselves in speaking to each other mindfully. So, quote, "If any problem comes up in the group, then speak about it in a skillful way. I see it like this, I feel like this," and then listen to what the other person has to say. The Western monks should learn to listen with an open mind, both to the words of others and to their own thoughts. When a view or opinion arose in their mind, they should be aware of it as simply that, a view and opinion, and remind themselves that as yet they did not know, in fact, whether it accurately reflected the truth of things. The mind was the measure of the effectiveness of their practice. If they were experiencing mental suffering, that meant that they had deviated from the Dhamma and allowed craving to arise. In community life, devotion to the Dhamma and Vinaya would dissolve all sense of conflict and bring a feeling of unity in diversity. One of the guiding principles of monastic life laid down in the Vinaya is that every monk and nun should make themselves open to admonishment from all other members of their community. But mutual admonishment is not an easy ideal to live up to. In Thailand, the cultural emphasis on preserving social harmony through non-confrontation makes it particularly difficult. Nevertheless, Luang Por would often speak on this topic. One year during the Rains Retreat period, Luang Por instructed the Mechi community on this principle in detail. By this time, his health was in decline, and he had been unable to visit the Mechi section as often as he had in previous years. He emphasized the importance of each Mechi learning how to admonish themselves as a foundation for admonishing others. They had to learn how to teach themselves how to take care of their minds. There's a quote from Luang Por Chah: "Before admonishing anyone else, you should admonish yourself. Why? Because if you don't, and that person doesn't accept your admonishment, then you may lose your temper. You have to put yourself in a good frame of mind first. Then if she scolds you or abuses you, you won't let it affect you. You know you've done the right thing. If it's necessary to admonish someone and they take it well, then that's good. But if they don't, then that's their affair, not yours. If the person you admonished criticizes you, then listen to what they have to say. If she says, 'You're just jealous of me,' ask yourself whether it's true. Investigate it. If it's not, then she's got it wrong, and that's her responsibility. Your practice is to let go, to learn to see everything in terms of Dhamma." Those who received admonishment were to constantly train themselves to be open to the words of others, even if they seemed unfair or inaccurate. Learning how to deal with praise and blame was an essential element of the path to wisdom. It's a quote from Luang Por Chah: "You need to learn how to take responsibility for your speech and actions. Then, if you act with a good intention, and you're accused of acting with an impure intention, you can be at ease, because you know your own mind, and you know for sure that it's not true. The Buddha taught us to have mindfulness at all times. When you're going to say something, do you have a good intention? What's the purpose of your words? You have to be aware of your actions. Then, when someone says you spoke improperly, you don't get upset because you considered well before speaking those words. You know your intention was good, and the person who says you did wrong is mistaken. You are at ease. Are you as good as they say? You have to know yourself. Don't believe anyone else. Watch out. They say you're bad. That's someone's words. They say you're good, and it's just words. It's not who you are. Only you know that. We come here to let go. If someone gives you an admonishment, then receive it with a sadhu Glad that you're getting it for free. Whether you're in the right or the wrong, listen. It's through listening that wisdom can arise. He illustrated his advice with his own interpretation of a Zen training method. There's a quote. The Zen masters teach their students to reduce conceit and views. There's not much study involved. His students start to nod while they're sitting in meditation. The teacher hits them on the head with a long stick. The student says, "Thank you, sir, for being so kind as to hit me on the head with your stick. It reminded me of what I'm supposed to be doing. Thank you, sir." Can all of you Meichis living here thank each other for admonishment? Give it a try. It takes wisdom. If any of you get drowsy during meditation, have Meichi Kamfa hit you over the head with a stick, and then say, "Thank you." Could you do it? Understand this point. The Meichis were to see how valuable it was to receive admonishment, and how fortunate they were to be in a situation where they could receive it. I'll finish with another short teaching on disputes in the Sangha and the way that Lumpur Cha handled more serious disputes. Disputes amongst members of the Sangha were infrequent, but not unheard of. When the quarreling parties were summoned to his kuti, Lumpur would refuse to accept that either party was completely in the right or wrong. He would say that both sides must have contributed to the dispute to some extent or other, and both were culpable. Ajahn Sudhiro was present at probably the most extreme incident to occur. And this is a quote. There was a dispute the year I arrived. It reached the point where one monk started chasing after the other with a knife in his hand. Lumpur showed no sign of fear or hesitation. He spoke from his seat in a very normal voice. The monk came back, put down the knife, and started to cry. Overall, there were very few problems. Maybe it was the power of the Dhamma, of the virtue and goodness that Lumpur had accumulated. Even if there were odd incidents, there were no harmful consequences. There was never any danger. When Lumpur spoke, then that would be the end of it. People could put down their enmity. He wouldn't allow us to drag up old matters. The knife-waving incident and Lumpur's response to it were exceptional. It was clearly understood by all at Wat Pah that physical violence was completely unacceptable. Nevertheless, one day many years later, monks leaving the Dhamma hall after the evening practice session came across two teenage novices in the midst of a fight, lashing out at each other with their flashlights. The following day, after evening chanting, the Sangha was convened below Lumpur's kuti. Ajahn Supon was one of the monks present. There's a quote. After Lumpur had instructed us on a number of matters, he eventually told the two novices to come out to the front, where he questioned them about what had occurred the previous evening. After he examined them, he said that in the 25 years since he'd established the monastery, this was the first time that there had been a fight amongst the novices. He explained concisely why it was such a bad thing to happen, and then he made an announcement to the Sangha. And this is a quote. On consideration, I see no benefit in allowing these two novices to live here anymore. Although one of them has only recently gone forth, and his actions are more forgivable, this other one has been here 2 years, and not only is he still unable to set a good example to others, he has also behaved unacceptably. I see no point in the two of them continuing here. What is the opinion of the Sangha? After Lumpur had spoken in that way, nobody dared to say anything. If anyone had spoken up with good reasons why they should be allowed to stay, there might have been a different outcome, but there was silence. Lumpur finally asked Ajahn Wirapon to provide a response on behalf of the Sangha. Ajahn Wirapon said he agreed with Lumpur. At first, Lumpur threatened to have the novices disrobe there and then and go home in their bathing clothes, but in the end he allowed them to stay until the following morning. When another fight broke out between two young monks the following year, Lumpur was more peremptory. Get out. If you're going to act like that, then you can't stay here. Go. You can't live with me. Find a pair of trousers. It was the last of such incidents. And finished with a quote by Lumpur Cha on arguing. It's like the two monks who started arguing about when the sun is closest to the earth. One said in the morning because that's when it's biggest. The other said at noon because that's when it's hottest. They went to ask the teacher to adjudicate. He said, "Go and eat your lunch."